Speak No Evil is a 2024 psychological horror movie, written and directed by James Watkins. It's a remake of the 2022 Danish film of the same name, and stars James McAvoy, Mackenzie Davis, and Aisling Francosi. The story's about a family who's invited to spend the weekend at an idyllic country house. What begins as a dream vacation soon turns into a psychological nightmare.
We can't let on. Yeah? We can't look stressed or scared. We just have to go out there and be completely normal.
I try my best to go into movies with an open mind as best as I can and just enjoy movies for what they are and not for what they're not, and not judge them harshly, especially based on past things. But in a case like this, I'm not gonna lie, I just couldn't, because I am such a big fan of the original Danish film from 2022. I think it's brilliant. Yes, it's disturbing as all hell and stuck with me and still sticks with me. And it's been like 2 years, but it still lingers because that's how dramatic and just well done that movie is. And I just didn't feel like there was any need to make a remake, because for one, I think that movie is just that incredible. But for two, it's only been 2 years, and it's not even like, yeah, it's called a Danish film, but half that movie is in English. So it's not even like the whole entire thing you're reading subtitles. There's quite a bit of it that's in English. So it's not even that. And it just bothers me when we take these amazing foreign films, and instead of getting people and encouraging people to see these and get through the subtitles, because even if it's hard to do, which in my case, it's really hard for me to do with subtitles. I have dyslexia and not the greatest vision, but I do it anyway, because when there's movies that are that special, it's worth it. And this is one of those movies. And so it frustrates me. Instead of encouraging people to do that and see this movie, maybe even make a dubbed version. If you're struggling that hard with subtitles, then do a dubbed version of that movie. But either way, I just don't get why we do remakes in a situation like this. It's very frustrating. I mean, it's one thing if you're taking like a 10-year-old or 20-year-old film that's foreign and making an American version, that's one thing. But 2 years? I mean, they started making this right away. That movie was still popping off. Everybody was talking about it, and they were already making this. So my point is, this was hard for me to go in with that same state of mind that I try my best to have. I honestly went into this expecting to really dislike it, especially with the way Blumhouse has been doing things this year. I've not been a fan at all of their other 3 movies that they've had this year. They've been really, really bad. Honestly, all 3 of those will probably be on my top 10 worst horror movies, that is, of this year. Like, that's how bad those movies have been. So with that track record, it being a remake of a movie that I think is incredible, I just had a hard time believing at all that I was going to enjoy this. Even though I'm a big fan of James McAvoy, and the cast in general are all really, really good actors. So there was that. And then the trailer looked competently shot, but still. And then on top of that, like everybody, we saw the trailer a billion freaking times. You saw it constantly. I mean, every movie I went to see, this trailer was playing. So it had that against it as well. I had just grown really sick of it. So I'm going to be totally honest. I had to kind of drag my feet into the theater to go to see this. I really didn't want to see it. I just didn't want to review it. I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. Either way, though, I wasn't excited at all for any reason to see this movie. So I know that's a lot of setup to basically say how low my expectations were going into this. But I gotta say, I was so impressed. I came out of the theater the first thing I did was tweet out how just blown away I was, how thoroughly impressed with this movie I was. Because, yeah, it's not nearly as bleak as that original. That movie is so dark and bordering on depressing, especially the ending of that. And this goes a different direction. But this movie still goes hard. This movie is still extremely dark, bothering, upsetting. There is so many things that happen in this that they took and made it in a different way that original was, but they still found a way to make those things super disturbing and uncomfortable. I just think it's so crazy to go and see a remake where you think you know exactly beat for beat what's going to happen, because at least from the trailer, I mean, it looks like it's basically the same movie. And they do follow along that same bone structure in a lot of ways. Like, this isn't a movie that's completely going off the script. I mean, they do still stick to mostly that same story. It's just the way they go about getting there and how they do things feels very, very different. The tone of this movie feels different. But I'm telling you, this movie goes hard. It gets brutal. It gets violent. There's gore. I mean, it really goes for it at times. And I was just impressed with that. But I was even more impressed with the acting, because it wasn't just James McAvoy. Every single actor in this goes for it and does an incredible job. Even the kids. I mean, everybody feels so believable. That daughter, when she gets emotional, I mean, my heart was breaking. I wanted to give her a hug. I mean, it really is that well performed, and I did not expect that. I did not expect to be so absorbed and into this movie that even though I kind of knew the plot points, I still felt surprised. I still felt on the edge of my seat. It gets extremely intense, and you just don't know what they're going to do, especially as it gets into the final act, because the way they go about it is really smart. And what they do with it, I think, is really well done. It's so well shot and directed. The writing's great. The dialogue is great. I really appreciate how they took this foreign sensibility and foreign way of doing things and saying things, and didn't so much change the concept, but instead translated it into our American sensibilities and how we would say things, how we would take things. You know, it really, really impressed me how it did all that. And it is tough to talk about this because I'm dancing around it, because I don't want to spoil this for anyone that hasn't seen the original or hasn't seen this one. So I'm not spoiling things. I'm being as careful as I can about all that, but just the way they do things, I was so impressed with, because there's this real sense of helplessness, being frustrated at the characters, wishing that they would do things that they're not doing, things like that they did so good in the first movie that made you feel so frustrated, especially by the end of that movie. But they found a way to do the same thing, but in a different way, and make you still feel a lot of those same emotions, but in different ways. And like I said, it's not as bleak, but it is still just as dark and still is very disturbing. But I'm really impressed with this movie. I've even seen people say that they prefer this over the original. And I personally don't know if I'd go that far, but I do understand why. And I'm not gonna lie, I really, really enjoyed this. So I'm not gonna say I necessarily prefer this over that original, but I do think that it deserves a place, and it's still definitely worth seeing. I was just really impressed with the writing in this. It really surprised me because they don't make a ton of changes, but how they do change things, just, it felt like it works. It made sense. It flowed correctly. It felt natural. It didn't feel like a remake. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's just crazy because while you're in it, it doesn't feel like you're watching a remake. Yes, when it's over and you think about it, you're like, you could see, you know, they're basically the same movie. There's a lot of the same things in it, but it is so well put together and feels so natural, and everybody feels so connected to this story and emotionally giving it everything they have, that you can't help but just be in it with them, be in it with this cast, and not feeling like you know what's going to happen next. But there was a lot of smart choices in making this movie, and everybody involved did a great job. Everything from the prop department, whoever picked out this location, like the way everything looks is fantastic. There's so many little decisions that were made that helped make it feel how it does, the way they feel isolated and out in this middle of nowhere kind of situation that feels believable, that doesn't feel, you know, like sometimes you'll see a movie and you feel like it's engineered, you know what I mean? You don't actually buy or believe whatever they're trying to do. In this case, feeling isolated and alone, you don't necessarily feel that way, but in this case, it feels organic. Everything feels real and natural and believable. I personally have been in locations that kind of reminded me of where they're at and what exactly it's like to be where they are and feel how they feel at times. Just that feeling of unknown and being in a new place, but also in a place where you're not sure you can contact the outside world. They just did a really good job of making the audience feel what they're feeling. And even though I said the entire cast did a great job, James McAvoy does stand out, and holy shit is he intimidating. He is terrifying in this role. I mean, you can see from the trailer how yoked and just big he is, but he's just so imposing, and you can't even really get it from the trailer until you're in this movie and really kind of engulfed by it, just how scary and how uncomfortable he makes you. Because even when you're not feeling like he's gonna kill someone, just the way he makes you feel uncomfortable, the things he does, how he talks, it's so gradual. It starts out as he's just like this guy you want to give a hug, to the point where you're terrified to be in the same space as him. He just does such a great job of ramping that up and becoming this monster. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'd put it on the best of the year list, but I am very surprised how enjoyable and how good I actually did think this movie was. I'm also, once again, super impressed with Aisling Franciosi. I loved her in stop motion earlier this year. I just really appreciate her in everything she's in. She really throws herself into that role. And I think, once again, she does a great job in this. So I'm not saying you need to rush out to a theater to see this, but I do think that if you do see this in a theater, you're not going to be disappointed by it. It does a great job of giving you and rewarding you for being in a theater, especially as it ramps up towards the end. It's very intense, and so seeing it on the big screen, I do think is worthwhile. But either way, I think even at home, it's going to be a good one to stream. I just think it's a solid movie. I'm not saying it's best of the year or anything like that, but I was extremely surprised on how much I did enjoy it.
Please, we need to get out of here now.
But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this every single week, I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member by clicking on the join button down there and help support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about Blumhouse's last movie. A very different review, very different opinion on that, I should say. And I'll see you guys next time.